know, you probably didn't have a chance to catch up on this, but there's a whistleblower, Daniel Hale, who is a drone whistleblower.
Yes.
He was actually taken to jail this past week. And I want to note that he is in the Alexandria Detention Center, which is the same facility where
In
Chelsea
Virginia.
Manning attempted
Yeah.
in Virginia, and yeah, Alexandria Detention Center in Virginia, in the Eastern District of Virginia. This is where a lot of these cases go through the courts, through that court system. And this is where Chelsea was held for a year when she was resisting the grand jury investigating WikiLeaks. And she attempted suicide towards the end of her year of detention in this facility. Now he's in there. They didn't. He didn't violate any of the terms of a supervised release. This is like a power play on the part of the U.S. government to put him in detention. He's got a month or two before his sentencing date in July. He exposed the assassination complex under President Obama, provided these documents that Jeremy Scahill was able to use for the Drone Papers project and for his book on the assassination complex. It was a kind of a follow-up to his project on Dirty Wars, which did very well and exposed a lot of really important information and aspects of the U.S. empire. And so now he's there, sleeping on a cement bed. I understand he's in solitary conditions. The pretexts of trying to prevent him from self-harm because there might be concerns about his mental health. So he's in these conditions that we know cause you to deteriorate. This is the same facility that Julian Assange would be held in if he was brought to the United States and put on trial. And it played a part in the judge deciding to reject the extradition request against him because she heard details about how people would be treated in this facility. So I just need to outline that. I need to show some solidarity with him because what he's going through is really receiving no attention. I did an article, I wrote about it, and then 24 hours later, The Intercept found the time to publish an article, even though it was their source. It took them a long time to get to it, and they used I was pissed because they used the same headline that I used for their article. Yeah, and Alex Emmons is their grunt they use to write about these stories, but it wasn't a very detailed story. It didn't even point out the thing that I have pointed out about Chelsea and Julian Assange, and it just had a lot of basic information. And actually, it didn't even point out that there's been a chain of events ongoing where he went to the court in the middle of April and he told them that he does have a substance abuse problem. And they then changed the terms of his bail to having to subject himself to substance abuse testing on a regular basis. And then I don't know if that was a catalyst for him being thrown in prison or had anything to do with him being put into the detention. But they didn't point out that for like a week or so, this has been unfolding. And I'm truly baffled because I think it says a lot about how horrible the media is, especially in the DC area. You've got the Washington Post and Politico that I know follow this court system. You have court reporters that follow this court system for high profile cases. You have people throughout the country that follow this court system for high profile cases. It's the same kind of a court system like the Southern District of New York. There are people who aren't even in those areas that follow it from like California or other parts of the United States. And yet there wasn't a single story written about Daniel at all. And I did a search.
Biden's president. Nobody cares. Like,
right. It's just there's does it show that Biden's representing people of color and elevating women to positions? No. So we need to ignore it. It doesn't serve that.
That's really infuriating. I'm glad that you're on the beat and I'm glad that you shared that. And I didn't know. I actually didn't know. And it's not because I don't follow the news. It just hasn't received attention. Like you said, I like everybody's too busy applauding Joe Biden for not being Donald Trump to like notice that a lot of the same policies are still in place and respect to these kinds of things. I mean, not just with the whistleblowing. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the sort of consistency that's been maintained with US foreign policy. And I think this kind of falls into that category of things that just there's so much continuity when it comes to whistleblowers and anything involving the national security. And it's deeply attached to foreign policy, right? Because this guy exposed the drone program.
Right.
And of course, that's really infuriating. And you know what the Biden administration has gotten really good at, and they've been good at this since they really came into office, is kind of like pacifying progressive organizations by like giving them a number to somebody in the White House so that they can call and feel like they're being heard. And that's what you keep hearing progressive organizations say is like, this is the first time that we've had like an ear in the White House listening to us. And it's like, they're playing you. It's clearly a strategy. Like, yeah, Joe Biden's chief of staff like calls you sometimes. Have they actually implemented anything? And then they've also done a really good job of like acting like they respond to progressive pressure. So there was all this pressure about vaccine patents and waiving them, which was good pressure. And now everyone's being quiet because it was the news reported it as Joe Biden is agreeing to waive the patent protections. But that's actually not the case, as this article that David Sirota shows. It's like there's fine print here. And this is really just kind of a mirage. And it's kind of like the same thing they did with Yemen, where they were like, we're going to stop participating in Saudi's offensive operations. We won't be helping them, only in defensive. But then it's like now everything's just being made out to be a defensive operation. So it's all like subjective, and nothing has really changed. And it's like this with everything. And so yeah, it's like really concerning that it's working, because it does work. Like, is anybody talking about IP waivers anymore? No. Everyone's like, oh, we pressured everyone's actually like, wow, Biden really responds to pressure in a way Obama didn't. And there might be like a little bit of truth to that, but I think that has more to do with the moment we're in versus responding to progressive pressure. Like, everyone's like, look at his infrastructure plan. And it's like, almost everything he's doing is being portrayed as being done to compete with China. Like, have you noticed that?
Yeah,
everything good is part of the Cold War.
That's going to be a good segue to a thing I have queued up to play for you that you haven't seen, actually that I haven't seen. So we'll be giving our raw reactions in this episode. But it is worth mentioning before we move far from this topic that I raised. Just Security, Hina Shamsi did a piece for that site about the rules that the Trump administration had completely torn apart around the drone program. And again, a lot of this is all very subjective. Do you even believe that the safeguards that Obama developed around the targeted assassination program actually had any impact on who was killed or captured? It's all up to your interpretation. It depends on how cynical you're feeling on any given day or how realistic you are about the way government works. I mean, if they wanted to execute somebody, they were going to find the justification to take out those targets as they had selected them in their Terror Tuesday meetings. That being said, there were rules that were adopted. They were torn apart by Donald Trump, and he just took the entire complex back to its early days before anybody claimed to have any care about human rights or international law when it came to executing the program, which perhaps makes it more honest than it was when Obama was running it in his final days in office. And that's the system that Joe Biden is running now. We have no evidence at all that anything has been done to restore those so-called rules. And then what happens? We're talking about the continuity of administrations. We're talking about the ways that they suppress progressive pressure. Another thing they're doing is they throw these things into a kind of bureaucratic review. They say, we're going to be looking at this closely. We're conducting a review of our policy, and we'll let you know about the decision that we get to. So they're going to examine the safeguards and rules, and it'll be a few months from now they'll get back to us and tell us what they think they want to keep and what has to be changed. That's the same thing that they're doing with the Iran policy. We're in
Right.
review, we're looking at it closely, we'll let you know. Meanwhile, as you would be quick to point out, all of these children and vulnerable families are being hurt, suffering, people are dying under the sanctions regime, and they just have to wait for Grandpa Joe to figure out what sort of an agreement he's willing to make with Iran.
Right.